Hello and welcome back to PH Rock Up. I'm your host Manny, and today we have Jack Wulhouse. We originally met a couple of years ago before he headed out to Seattle to do Washington as well. So it's an awesome connection to have back then, but he's been up to some cool shit recently, so it's good to have him back. How are we doing, Jack?
Yeah, good, Manny. How are you?
I'm good. Obviously, since coming back, you've kind of transitioned through a couple roles. But
Yeah.
before we get into all of them, if you give us a little introduction on how you go into strength and conditioning, so people can sort of understand your journey.
Yeah, my role's just endlessly changed. Started off as a personal trainer 11 years ago. So straight out of college in the UK, which is obviously after secondary school or after high school. Went and did a level 2, level 3 personal training kind of equivalent, not degree, course, which got me into personal training. I was straight into working in commercial gym spaces, so working with Gen Pop, learning what I actually enjoyed about the industry. I can't lie. I'd love to have a story about how, had a really horrible childhood that pushed me into strength and conditioning and pushed me into lifting weights when I was younger. But reality was I really didn't know what to do with myself after secondary school and college. And so I kind of fell into a sports course. I was interested in being active as a kid. So I just thought that was the direction that I most gravitated towards when I was looking at the whole list of courses to do. Yeah, and then that connected me to personal training, which is where I kind of established my roots in what I enjoyed about the fitness industry, helping people, building a service that was beneficial to individuals that had a goal and didn't know how to get there, and how I could be that mediator in the middle. And that then spurred me on to kind of my love for education and just keeping myself in the know of what's currently working in the industry, what's a bit more of a trend, and trying to spot those and communicate those to people. Because obviously this surge of trends is kind of increased over the last 10 years. So just as I've kind of been in the industry, that's been a really kind of fast accelerant of information for the general public. So as personal training in commercial gyms for between 2 and 3 years. And then whilst I was there, I kind of fell in love with the idea of helping people that were in pain or injured. So I started to research and followed a diploma in sports therapy. Whilst doing that course, I managed to attain not necessarily a role, but I was working in a space that was sports therapy orientated or rehabilitation orientated. So there was a network of coaches there, physios, osteos, other personal trainers / strength coaches that were occupying out of the space. So we had a really good little referral network of treatment into the weight room. And I kind of already had that natural, I enjoyed being in the treatment room. I enjoyed kind of being hands-on with patients and helping them in those moments. But actually I was feeling kind of like the gravity towards more exercise therapy. So getting them in the weight room, and as they move and as they exercise, trying to then educate them on the importance of movement and why it's important for their injury. So even though their perceptions were, I need a massage or I need a treatment, actually, the treatment was just kind of like a gateway to movement. But if I can get you moving already, then I don't need to spend a whole hour with you in the treatment room. We can do like 5-10 minutes. And then let's go in the gym and let's see if you can squat better, or let's see if you can walk better, or whatever the outcome task might be. And that kind of led my 5 years of, I guess, niching my future in the industry, just niching it down to working with people that were injured and pain. And that then kind of led into pain science and how injuries occur and load versus capacity and Tim Gabbett's work, and all of these sorts of names started to trickle through. And I was fortunate enough / unfortunate enough to not really have a great education behind me because of moving to a whole new city right in the middle of my GCSEs. So I didn't really get the opportunity to get my A's, B's, C's, all those sorts of things. So university kind of was written off for me for a long time, until I went to a sports performance and rehabilitation conference at University College Birmingham, which is just down the road from me. And they just finished updating their human performance center, which is a nice, shiny, spangly, brand new gym with all this equipment that I'd never really had any exposure to. Spoke to them about my work and what I do, how long I've been doing it, and my interests. And they said enroll. and we'll see what we can do to get you through on our undergraduate in strength and conditioning and sports nutrition. And that sparked me into my degree, my undergraduate, which was really good. I was able to work alongside that, so I was getting direct application to the knowledge I was gaining. Obviously, a great connection of network into new names and new people within the area. And again, that was kind of like, how am I now going to bridge the gap between strength and conditioning and its concepts and rehabilitation and working with general pop? And how does that apply to athletes? And I'm connecting all of these dots from my journey of where I can now build a quality service between finishing my undergraduate. So obviously an undergraduate in the UK is 3 years. So I did 3 years on an undergraduate program. That
In
was when
England.
in England. That's the point. I then managed to get on the internship at UW, which was an incredible experience. So that was the summer of 24 to 25. Am I getting that right? No, 23 to 24. That sounds more like it. And these last few years have been an absolute blur. Like, can't believe how fast time's gone. But yeah, 23 to 24. And it was an incredible experience. Again, the first time working with a super intense kind of program that was solely about getting people from, this point to this point in such a kind of quick and intense method and, way of doing it. So it was a great experience. Whilst I was out there, decided that when I was to come back to the UK, I'm going to do my master's. So I applied for a master's in strength and conditioning at the University of Wolverhampton. That's an intense year. But again, because it's not far away from me, I was able to work all the way through and kept my private stuff going. Again, I'm just trying to build my knowledge base up, trying to question things, be curious, trial different concepts, learn different methods and why things work and why things might not work, and all these sorts of things that you learn on a degree. Learn to question things and be curious, and all those sorts of great questions, which is what was great about the master's program. And then after that, kind of wanted something a bit more stable and secure, and that was in an institution. So now I work from the University of Warwick as one of their strength and conditioning coaches. And I still obtain and work privately outside of that. But yeah, so now I've kind of got this like profiling of all these different industries and all these different concepts and all these different individuals over the years, that they all have different problems, different issues that need, individual work. So then that ability to try and relate and chisel things down to them has been kind of like one of the core things that I've kind of kept consistent through all of those professions, I guess. But yeah, that leads us up to today.
Nice. Obviously, you've had your fair share of experience in this industry. What is something that over the years and more recently has got you fired up to either learn or do more of recently?
This is a quick shout out to our main sponsor on this channel, TeamBuilder. TeamBuilder is all-in-one platform that hosts programs, questionnaires, testing, anything that you may need for your athlete's performance. You can host it in TeamBuilder. TeamBuilder also now has 2 different sides, which is OS and Practice. For more information on TeamBuilder, check out the link in the description. And if you use code PACHOCKUP all together, you will get a 30-day free trial.
It's a good question. I've really enjoyed the trials and tribulations of working in a university within the UK. And the reason why is because in an ideal world, we have access to all these, fancy pieces of equipment, and we have all the access to these, incredible testing tools, and everything's just at our disposal, and we're able to kind of manage everything. So that means we can build anything we want, because we have all the information to do so. But the challenge and the thing that's kept me really engaged there is that's just not the reality. We've had to be very good on our logistics and how we operate and build programs for different squads, because different squads have different training ages. Different training ages have different ability to adapt to a certain stimulus. So again, we're kind of having to work on our feet quite a lot. So it means every day is different. Almost like we just had a rotation of teams this year. So we've got a brand new cohort of performance squads under our branch. I've taken on like 3 of those new squads. And you get a real mix, and you've got some incredible athletes, and you get some people that have never been in the gym before that are, still able, they're competing in their sport, but now they need to build on some of those physical qualities. But again, they've never touched a bar before. So again, it's kind of managing the room, managing the program, being relatable, being, tough love with them. because it's teaching them how to be mature in a gym environment and not get carried away and not treat it like a general sport practice where they can kind of be a bit more curious with their movements and stuff, like trying to keep them, moving well and learning why they need to move this way and why we're going through a steady program. And the concepts were that we need you to be good movers. By the end of this, it'd be lovely to say we can get you benching 100 kilos, but you've never touched a bar. So I'm just happy if we can get to the end of the term and you can now bench efficiently and bench appropriately to then further when we get you on for another rotation of performance, hopefully. Well, I've got now a squad that I can really put some good programs of like trying to get increased power output or increase more of these metrics that are more transferable to the sport. But sometimes it's just about the movement, and it's not necessarily about those big fancy characteristics of sport. And it's that's the kind of thing I'd like to. It's almost like I've got more fired up this year about refining and simplifying my processes.
I think you've kind of nailed on a point. And again, I was over visiting you in February last year, and I managed to sit in one of your sessions.
Mm-hmm.
And again, we both experienced that internship and the intensity and the everything that we can do. But then I saw what was happening at Warwick in one of your teams, and you did have to adapt the program to fit sort of like it was very individual because like there was different training ages, different training levels. There was men, women, all training under the same team. So like having seen that adaptation, you're kind of like, okay, programming isn't as simple as making one program for the whole team and then adapting it generally. You're kind of having to rethink the whole, okay, bench press might not be the best thing for them. Let's work on their push-ups first. Let's just get them moving and seeing what they can and can't do. So I think my question from this is, how has your sort of private experience shaped and molded your now collegiate and the way you attack that?
Yeah, so I mean, it goes back to the principles of strength and conditioning. We're trying to obtain an adaptation. This is the method that we use to do that. These are the fundamental movements of the body that you haven't exercised before. And we're talking, let's talk from Gen Pop perspective. Like the process is, well, you don't have anything to really train for besides just being an all-round good mover. And over time, if we layer that and we layer up these movements, give it 3, 4, 5 years, and you've done a good rotation of these fundamental movements through some basic kind of progressive overload programs, you should be a pretty competent mover, and you should be pretty strong, and you should have a good baseline amount of power. I like to think of it like kind of like a samurai warrior with a samurai sword, right? So like the sword didn't start sharp and it didn't start pristine and it didn't start shiny. It started as a rugged, rough, piece of metal that had to be sharpened and refined over time to become what it needed to be and become the most notorious weapon that most people think about when they think of swords. So, but it didn't just happen overnight. It took repeating the same blacksmithing process of just heat it up, whack it down, heat it up, whack it down, heat it up, give it a sharpen. And I like to think of it like it's that process of, even though day to day it looks the same, when we zoom out and we stack that up, you stack up 3, 4, 5 years of this, just going through a generally good program that rotates as you obtain these benefits, then you will have achieved a pretty good standard of movement, strength, power. And from there, we can now really refine that blade. So if you want to become more powerful, great. We've got an excellent foundation to do that from. If you want to get strong as an ox, no problem. We've got a really good foundation on all of your fundamental movements to do so. So I think doing that with an individual and actually having people under my wing for like 5, 6, 7, 8 years. I think that's the oldest retaining client I have is up to 8 years. It's been really obvious to see that now. And it's only when we really stop and me and him stop and reflect when he does something and he shocks himself now. And I'm like, you can do this now because you've done 8 years of not fancy work, just the not sexy, repetitive task of putting your body through a little bit more each cycle or each week. You've done a little bit more than you did before, and you've layered that up over 8 years. Now look where you are. So in terms of then applying that to the collegiate system, obviously we don't have the luxury of time. So we've got 30 weeks per term and 30 weeks per year, academic year. That's 10 weeks a term. And then again, we also have in there like exams, reading week, things that might upset but if as an absolute maximum, we get 30 weeks in the academic year. And we have a people under the performance cycle for 2 years, and then they get to reapply. Some of them will stay on depending on their performance and their application in their clubs. But most of them will, not most of them, some of them might change. So some people will lose the performance benefits, and then some new teams will have gained performance benefits. So we're just finishing term 2 of a new rotation. So my process with the new squads I'm not really focused on anything really sports specific right now, because a lot of you aren't in a state where you've layered a lot of these simple processes yet. So I've got 30 weeks to prepare you for the next 30 weeks. And that's essentially how we've looked at it, is we've looked at this academic year and broken down the core fundamental movements of the body, push, pull, lower body push, lower body hinge, crawling, all these vertical pull, vertical push, the fundamental movements of the body. And we've put them into a program for 10 weeks. And then we've kept some in there that are quite applicable to, progress or regress. But then we've filtered some in, filtered some out. So by the end of the academic year, they have a really large, good level of movement maturity, to where now, okay, the next 30 weeks are going to be where we really start to sharpen that samurai sword. We start to feel the full potential of what you've built over 30 weeks. Whereas if we were to just jump the gun and run onto the battlefield with your blunt samurai, like, you're not going to be the best athlete that you could have been. I could have set you up better. So that was my kind of thought process going into this academic year. But that was something that I definitely started to apply during my undergraduate with my private work, was that we need to just try and be good and try and be ready to do anything. Like, you don't have a specific sport that you need to be good at, but I want you to be ready. So if an opportunity comes around for you to play a five-a-side, or for you to go and play a touch rugby match, or go to a squash court, or whatever it might be, I want you to feel ready enough and physically ready enough to do that. And in order to do that, we just need to do the basics, and we need to do it for a while before that feels achievable. It's not going to happen overnight.
Yeah, with the sort of teams you've been given and teams you had, what are some things that you're doing that prepares them for the level that they are playing at and what they have to get achieved during the time with you?
Okay. I mean, are we talking from a physical standpoint here, or are we talking from like mentally preparing them for the efforts of the game, I guess?
Physically.
Okay. So the sports that I coach are very, very kind of different. So we've got Thai boxing, taekwondo, lacrosse, women's lacrosse, and the taekwondo and Thai boxing are mixed. I should have said that. And then I got men's football, and I've part split coaching with another coach for the men's American football team for Warwick. So we need to kind of establish some form of needs analysis, right? That's just the, bread and butter of, you take on a team, right? I need to know the demands of the sport. I need to know typical bout times, intensities, and I need to know some basic physical characteristics of I wouldn't even compare it to an elite athlete. I just want to know what the average is, right? Where's that average line? What's the medium line that I need to bench against these individuals? And then we want to, in some ways, test them, but in many ways, because we don't have the ability to put them through like a really good testing battery with all this fancy equipment, a lot of it's done kind of within just kind of movement screening, looking at their movement competency, like attending some of their training sessions and just observing and seeing where their lowest hanging fruit is, depending on their training age. So again, something that I really emphasize doing with the athletes. Obviously, the time constraints and resource constraints that we have. But I took on 3 new teams this year. So men's football and women's lacrosse had performance last year. So they were already, there was a couple of new faces within those teams. But the new teams, I emphasized kind of, let's have in that first term, like book a one-to-one, sit down with me. I want to kind of talk to you about what's got you to where you are now. What's your understanding of the sport, and where do you feel you are in relation to your peers, in relation to someone you aspire to be? and also try and get some intrinsic and extrinsic motivators from them. So what drives you, what type of person are you? I'm trying to ask questions that are just easy for them to kind of answer, so I can get a good gauge as to who I'm working with. Because as well, as much as I'm working with 16, a team of 16, every single one of them are different, and every single one of them had a different process to get to where they are now. That it'd be stupid to create a program without that in mind, without trying to figure that out. We really try and put an emphasis on that. What that then does is that allows me to kind of not only do like some form of external analysis on the sport outside of these 16 people, but it allows me to then kind of stack them against that average. Like, where's your like minimum KPI of, compared to the average? So I want to see whether you've got a strength deficit, compared to the average, or whether it's a power deficit, or whether your tank and your engine's not in the right spot, or whether it's a combination of all three of those things. But once you educate the athletes on that's what my process is, that's what we're doing here, they don't feel judged to answer questions that I ask, and they don't feel judged to demonstrate when they're finding something difficult, because they're aware now that without knowing that, I can't necessarily see it, because we haven't got the testing equipment to do so, or like the ability to physically put a metric to it. So you've got to kind of involve them in the process and allow them to understand why it's important to, not base your perceptions of a movement on the very first time you do it. Because of course they do a clean for the first time. Some of them, boom, no problem. A couple of them, all right, this is really difficult, I can't wrap my head around it. I'm like, well, yeah, no shit. You've only just done it for the first time. Like, this is perfect. This is exactly what I want you to be doing. I want you to be asking questions and thinking, why are you finding it difficult? What is it about is this difficult? Because then that gives us momentum. That gives us something to chisel away at, and gives you a prompt to work on that outside of that weight room. So yeah, I think something that we really emphasize is trying to kind of involve them, is kind of where I'm getting to. We want to involve them in that process.
I think earlier as well, you'd mentioned that, like, I mean, you can get them to 100 kg bench easily, but what does that actually mean? And it's a conversation I've been having recently. And like, on one end, no one's ever complained about being too strong, right? But it's strength needed for all sports at very maximal level. And it's where we get to that conversation of, okay, like, kg bench for a female that's 60 kilograms is fucking unreal, right? But she's, we'll say, a cyclist. Like, is that important for them? Not necessarily. Can we instead drive more power, more explosivity out of them, so that they can do either big short sprints or do whatever is needed? So can you sort of kind of go back on that and sort of explain your sort of process on, okay, 100% bench isn't always the best, let's focus on something else?
And that's quite difficult, right? Because like I said to you earlier, there's such a vast amount of information now on social media, and we're working with uni students. Let's face it, they're going to be digesting that. They're going to be taking that on board. So they're going to be seeing inspirational characters, benching an incredible amount of weight, or they're going to see influential characters, doing specific movements, and they're advertising a snapshot in time of what their ability to do that is, but they very rarely grasp, right, the work that's had to do that. So take me, for example, and I like to use this a lot with the athletes, is like, I've never, I've followed multiple different programs over the years, but I've never done a specific sport that's really niched me to actually do anything specific. I've always been quite general. And by doing that over time and just kind of going through again that process of stacking up reps and weights over time, it's not like this is an incredible statistic, right? But just naturally through loading and lifting a little bit more each time and each rotation, I've managed to get up to 122 kilo bench, and I haven't really tried to do that. It's just kind of occurred, right? And it's only occurred because I've benched consistently, once a week. I don't even want to say once a week when I'm like
on it,
when I'm on it. But like, I've followed programs where there's no benching, and then recently did Benchuary and followed bench program for 5 days a week. So it's just like, it's looking at what's relatable, but by keeping it quite general, you can actually achieve a hell of a lot. but you've just got to give it time to do so. Now, if we're talking someone that's like, again, got only 30 weeks, or let's face it, the best case scenario is I've got a team that are coming on board and I've got 60 weeks because there's some first and there's some second years in that team that are going to be with it all the way through to the end. So I've got 60 weeks, right, with this team before there's potentially they lose performance or they might be on for 90 weeks, whatever might happen. But I've got 60 weeks. They're coming in with their ideas and they've already coming in with their perceptions and beliefs. I always, when I have these meetings with individuals, I always say, do you understand what the term coachable means? So are you coachable? Some of them answer immediately and they kind of go, yeah. And then we delve into that a little bit further. I said, well, what does it mean to you? What does being coachable mean to you? It strikes up a good conversation in what the I want you to be curious enough. So when I challenge your beliefs and perceptions, just because they're not necessarily relatable to your sport right now, it's not me saying that it's wrong. It's just that me saying that right now, that needs to not be your focus because currently your deficit, your KPI deficit is in lower body push strength and your bench is actually in a good solid spot for where I need it. Yes, we could get it incredibly good, but then we're just creating a greater deficit in something that we know is a problem. We know it's giving you issues. Let's take, take something like shin splints. Big issue within university sports because a lot of people are coming into university sport with low capacity in their calf and their soleus and low Achilles capacity. So their foot structure is quite weak just because they haven't really trained it heavy before. And now they're suddenly in a program where they're running 3-4 times a week, training twice, and their bones are just not able to adapt quick enough. They haven't got that prior capacity to adapt. So they create discomfort. So now, I could have that individual and they're like, right, well, yeah, but I want to improve my bench press. And I'm like, yeah, but you're not going to be able to continue your sport comfortably until we address this issue. So yes, we could go and bench for the next 30 minutes and I could get your bench, and I can do that for the next 10 weeks and your bench will be an incredible spot, but we're completely ignoring something that's hindering your sport and that's something that's like from a negative side. Even like you said earlier, if someone needs to be more powerful in their lower body and they want to bench more, then yeah, there needs to be a conversation. And my rule is, as long as you've done the program, I don't care what you do after that. As long as I'm in the loop with it, as long as I know what you're doing. So if you finish the program and you've got a bit of time before lectures and you've slept well, you're feeling good. I've seen that within the session, so I've physically got some form of information that's told me you're good. Then yeah, I'll come and help you bench if I've got the time, and then or here's a little bench set to do, and yeah. So like, as long as you've done the program, as long as you've done what I need you to do, well, go do it. Why not?
Yeah, I think this kind of brings me back to a conversation I had with Fink when I was at UW, and he was in the office, and I was like, Coach Fink, to process the program, like, what are you thinking about? What are you doing? And he was like, well, everything has to match and be equal. And for that, he was like, I kind of want like balanced athletes. So for every push, there's a pull. For every hinge, there's a knee dominant movement. So that kind of got me the exploring of, okay, and it's kind of something to the fact that you said, is like, if I can get you to push, pull, hinge, knee dominant movements, like, chances are specific lifts will go up even if we don't do them.
Mm-hmm.
And like, it's such a good point because like social media, now that you've mentioned it, like, it's driving you to this very niche, very unique way of movement. But like, keeping it simple and just making sure everything is balanced and adds up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Probably works fucking really good.
Like, you're only getting, like, this is the thing I try and emphasize with the athletes, because they always come with questions, and I encourage it. I encourage questions because questions lead to answers, and answers lead to more questions, and then answers, those answers lead to more. It's just an endless cycle, and that's what's beautiful about the industry is there is no specific set direction to go in from this point. There's just options. Now, what we need to do is we need to encourage people to be curious enough to learn about an option, and then just let's give it a go if it's justifiable. So, for example, like you said there, if I've got a triathlete or a cyclist and, they've been on a program for a while, they've improved a couple of metrics, but their main thing is, are you better at your sport? And if they're better, but let's say their squat's kind of plateaued a little bit, or their split squat or something's just kind of plateaued a little bit, and they go online and they search, they're following a power lifter, and they're like, oh my god, this guy can lift so much weight, that must be good for, this guy can split squat incredible amounts of weight. That's the program I want to be on, and then, bring it to, like, just like anything, I think as a whole, take this away from strength and conditioning, we just need to be more curious now more than ever, because there's so much information that there's so many people that can help you find the answer you're looking for, but it doesn't happen unless you ask the question. Now, the dangerous thing is when people commit immediately, because it's sexy to. So they'll see an exercise or they'll see a concept, and then immediately that's it. Their decision is made, and now what happens is they become in denial of anything else that could work. And I've never once looked at a concept online and gone, oh, that doesn't work. It does work for that individual in that snapshot of time, but also they could do another thing and that would also work, and they could do a different thing and that could also work. So again, this whole kind of like, you see a concept, and I'm always a big believer in, if you're so set on defending a concept by bashing other concepts, then chances are I'm not going to believe what you're saying, because you're now kind of starting to sound a bit defensive about this, about this specific way of doing things, that you're denying basic fundamentals of just training that has, that basic fundamentals of training sounds like it's a concept within itself. But if we think about it, like, there's so many things within what basic concepts they are. So when we actually look at it, a lot of these concepts are just gifted differently, packaged differently, but it's already been established. It's already a thing. Just someone's given it a fancy name and branded it.
Yeah, I think as well there's a question to be asked. Like, so one of the biggest ones in our industry is the Olympic weightlifter or not. And what it comes down to a lot of the time is the coaches can't actually coach it.
Yep.
So does that then become, like, you're batting for this method so much, like, can you not think of ways that other methods can fit into your program because you feel uncomfortable perhaps failing at them or not being as successful with them as you are coaching? Again, another one is also
valid,
conjugate.
right? Yeah, that's a perfectly valid reason not to do it. And in fact, actually, that's healthy, because you've got a limitation and you're not comfortable coaching it, but that doesn't mean it doesn't work.
Or you should bash it.
Yeah, or you should say, yeah, exactly. Or you should, and then you shouldn't get defensive when someone opposes that reason. You should actually encourage that, if you've got an athlete in the middle and they go and do some Olympic lifting with someone that knows how to coach it, because you can't, you don't feel comfortable enough to coach that, that's a beautiful thing. You've allowed yourself, you've set your pride aside, and you've given the athlete an opportunity to go and do something that we know is beneficial. We know it has beneficial properties, but and then on the other side, there is other ways to do things. So if you feel more comfortable leading them down that path, then that's fine. But again, as coaches, we're mentoring students to learn how to make decisions. So if we are if they come with a question, if they go, coach, I've seen this guy I like, and he's hammering snatches, and I want to learn to snatch, and I go, snatching's just rubbish. It's it's terrible for your joints. It's it's complex to learn. There's so many other options for you, and just like anyone that's saying that you should snatch, just don't listen to them. Like, that athlete in that moment is now going to, trust the person in front of them if you've got that relationship. And now, you think of that message that's now portraying, he's going to then feed that on to his peers. And now you're just squashing the athlete into one method, when really I encourage athletes to be curious. And if you've seen something and you're curious about it, bring that to me. And if I don't know about it in that moment, then that's only going to interest me more to go and learn about it, and to go and read about it, and to just go and try and get the information I need to give you the answers you need. And if I can't do that, then I'm going to seek someone that does know it. And, like a huge one that we have now is that on social media, I mean, I haven't seen much of it lately because I've, my algorithms just kind of fallen out of it. But for a long time, it was all about the functional movement patterns. And again, you look at it and you think, oh, okay, this is different. This looks different. And it makes you watch it because it's different. And again, in many ways, if you're in the right if you've done the right training before it, because it's quite complex, or it looks quite complex. Again, I'm not an expert here, but my perceptions of it are that looks cool. I would try it, but I wouldn't kind of put all of my eggs in that basket.
Yeah.
But I think we need to be open and curious to give it a go, or give some elements of it a go. I think the hard thing is that the reason why this, there's this, almost this bashing in the industry about it is because, they get the concept, and the people that believe in the concept get defensive when people challenge it. And then the people challenging get defensive when they get challenged. And then we end up nowhere. We end up in this storm of disagreement. And we just need to be curious enough to make our own decision and give it a go, or don't give it a go and just let it be a thing, because people clearly do it. It clearly works to some capacity for those individuals that do it. Could they get the results that they're getting another way?
Yeah.
Probably. They, could they be more, could they be less irritating about putting it in your face as like a, like
Content.
this, like this, you're going to break your back unless you start doing functional movement patterns training. Like,
I kind of know who you're talking about.
That is just not the case. And you're saying something that now, if the person that's reading it is trying to actually learn about it, they're going to see that information and go, oh God, I'm not going to do that. I don't want to break my back. I'm going to go and do this. And then it becomes a little bit cultish. I think, like I say, I think this is relatable to a lot of things, but I in the S&C industry and just general health and fitness industry, I think we just need to be a little bit more curious.
Yeah.
A lot of these concepts have been around for a long time, and longer than we know, longer than we initially presume. Sorry. So quite often there's already a lot of information out there about it. It's quite difficult now to create a new concept within the industry. But people want to make money, so they want to market it well, and they want to stir up emotions, and they want to stir up discussions, because then that increases their reach. And I think people just need to be aware of that. And I advocate students to be aware of this, because if chances are, if they're seeing a lot of it on their Instagram, it can either be for a great reason or not a great reason. Yep. So be curious enough to question it, and if it seems like it's the right fit, try it. If it doesn't work, no problem.
Yeah. So I've kind of came up with this method and sort of way of working around these things that I learned. And it's like, so we all talk about like having a toolbox as a coach. And when you're going to conferences, when you're looking at things online, you're sort of taking these tools and putting in the toolbox. But a lot of people are just seeing it as like a general toolbox with everything you get it chucked in. But like, I've been thinking about it and explaining it in this way of like, imagine having 4 tiers of a toolbox. Your first tier is like the go-tos, like your bread and butter, your principles, like those are the main things that you constantly use. Your second one is for like, okay, this athlete isn't quite responding to my first tool. Let me take something from the second toolbox and see if this works. And then like your fourth sort of tier is things that you've just learned at conferences, or you've just spoken to a coach and they give you this great idea. That'll go in your fourth. So your fourth will then go into your third. The third sort of tier is dedicated to experimenting with these things. Okay, I learned this specific method, or I'll give you an example. I'm currently coaching a lot of policemen and women. So a lot of their issues comes from the way that they're having to carry on a day-to-day basis. So a lot of them, if not all of them, complain of low back pain, glute, and hamstring pains. I had this podcast with Costa. He's military based in Italy. And he kind of explained to me, like, yeah, I do a lot of dead hangs with my military people. It just lengthens the spine. Or I do a lot of pendulums and all that stuff. And I'm like, actually, that's a fucking great shout. Like, why not? So I started experimenting it. So I went into my fourth and I put into my third. My clients are now in less pain. So like that is now one of my first tier for any time I've got new policemen or women that come into my program. Okay, chances are they suffer from some sort of back pain. Let me chuck that into their program. A couple of weeks later, boom, they're feeling better. And I think it's that cycle of like, okay, let's learn something. Let's not chuck it away just because we disagree with it. Let's
hmm
put you on fourth. Okay, from
hmm
fourth, third, let's experiment with it. Okay, from one and two, where does that fit? And it's sort of kind of going through this cycle of, okay, I don't know everything.
hmm
I've not had the experience some of these coaches have. I've not had the athletes some of these coaches have.
hmm
So I'm no one to say that's wrong.
No, it's right. Like you've got to. There's just got to be more trials of things. Like, and that's not even scientifically, just anecdotally. Just give it a go, and you'll just learn whether it once you give it time. Like that's the other thing we've got to understand here is like what adaptation are we trying to get? What's the time frame for that adaptation? So if it's neuromuscular, we know it can be fast. So we can almost make our assumptions, or we can almost kind of get an idea as to how effective it is just by giving it the time it actually needs to do so. And I've done this a lot recently with the women's teams for like pull-ups. So a lot of them want to be able to achieve a pull-up by the end of term 3. So term 2, end of the back end of the program, back end of the session, sorry. We've just been doing some mid-range isometrics with a knee tuck just to get a little bit of core work in there as well. And we've just built it up as long as possible. And they only need to do 2 or 3 sets. It's just been something that I've wanted to throw in there because chances are the reason why, you can't do a pull-up is because you don't spend enough time hanging on a bar. And it's just those muscles are inefficient at that pulling range and that pulling action. So let's just start engaging in it. Let's not think of the complexities of a pull-up. Stop trying to pull up, because when you do that, you do it in such an inefficient way that you're not stimulating the muscles that need to actually be stronger to achieve a nice, clean, good rep of a pull-up. So let's put you in a really strong position. Let's put you in a mid-range, 90 degrees. Let's put you in a chin-up as well. Let's get you neutral grip so it's nice and comfortable. And let's just pull those knees up to your level with your hip, so you're getting some core engagement. And let's just grit out as long as we can. And let's just and because it's again quite fun and it gets competitive because you get 2 people going at the same time, they really kind of start to cheer each other on and make sure they're working really hard and just having a bit of fun at the end of a session. But realistically, what that's done is we had our last session. It was just this morning. Like 3 or 4 of them I'd never seen do just like a full pull up. Are now going, they're just mucking around at the end of a session after their isometrics, and they're just doing a pull-up motion, and it looks clean. It looks like we're in a really good position now for term 3. Pretty much the whole squad are in a really good position to just get their first pull-ups or to get more pull-ups than they could do before. So it's not rocket science. It's just, just apply something, give it the time it needs to see whether it's taking effect. If it's not, so that for a few of them, the isometrics weren't really working. They couldn't really get to that mid-range and lock themselves in position. They could get to top range. So I started to do negatives, nice lowers from that position to a position where they feel like they can hold it. And now that's where they hold. So technically they were doing a short range eccentric, not a full range eccentric, but a short range eccentric to a static position. And that was what they were being able to hold. So not everyone got the same approach, not everyone got the same dosage, but the core product was the same. So again, there's multiple ways to skin a cat. There's lots of, we can apply lots of different methods when you look at them from the outside in, but realistically at their core, it's the same thing. I need them to get better at this. So I need to do this. Now, my initial point was about timing. So obviously strength's got a neuromuscular adaptation to it. So I could get someone quite strong, quite quick, in a period of weeks by just improving their drive. So just like getting them doing some overcoming isometrics or some form of heavy loading on a isolation movement. I can get whatever whatever movement it is, I can get it quite strong by taking that approach, just trying to increase neuromuscular effort, trying to increase motor recruitment. And by just doing that process, they're going to get stronger at something. And again, we try and educate in that process because obviously most individuals' perceptions are if you're really big and muscular, you're strong. But realistically, that's not the case. They might not have, they've got the potential to be, they've got a lot of muscle tissue and they've got a lot of motor units within that, but can they recruit them? And can they recruit them fast enough to make them even effective? So have they got the stiffness to be functional? And if I'm trying to just get someone stronger, I might take a neuromuscular route. I know I could probably get someone quite strong, quite quick at a very specific or niche movement, whether it's not for sport or whether it's for rehab or whether it's for a functionality purpose. If I'm now trying to develop physical quality, I like to call them. So when I'm talking we're talking hypertrophy, increasing cross-sectional area, improving pronation angle, all these sorts of things that are physical, right? We can put it under a scope, a telescope, and we can see it. It's physical. It's something that we can see. Now we're talking a long time. We're talking a lot of components here. So we're talking time, consistency, all your nutrition and recovery strategies have to be gearing yourself towards that adaptation, but we need time. Ultimately, that's one we have to bow to that as our concept. We need time for it. So again, it's like if I'm going to apply a concept, I'm first going to look at what am I trying to improve? What does that time look like? And then, okay, if I'm going to put it in, I'm going to make sure I give it enough time to do so. I'm not going to just be like, oh, okay, 2 weeks later, I'm not seeing an increase in muscle mass in my bicep from this exercise. I'm not going to continue doing it. So we have to kind of have some form of understanding of this, the whatever stimulus we're trying to obtain. We need to give it that grace. We need to give it that time that it requires to actually get better. And again, that's something that where science is difficult because everyone adapts to things slightly different. So some people layer muscle tissue quicker. Some people adapt to neuromuscular stimuli quicker. We know potentiation's kind of a thing. So again, there's just so much to think about that the more specific it becomes, the more we try and really niche it down, the more kind of away from the simplicity of it we get. And we just need to, I think, keep things simple in their delivery, especially when working with, I want to say, just general pop, but like I'm talking general pop, low training age athletes, or the medium to elite athletes. I think everyone can benefit from keeping things simple. And like you said earlier with Fink's approach, you got to just keep things balanced. Keep things balanced and apply that over time. If someone's under your management for 5 years and they've kept things balanced, but every couple of rotations they've added a few kilos here, or they've added a few extra reps here, or they've added some sets, or just either volume, intensity, or they're improving their work and increasing the density of those sets. As long as they're doing something that's slightly different, chances are they're probably going to get better over those 5 years. In fact, I'd put money on it, right?
Yeah, I think as well, so kind of going back to athletes and the way that the collegiate system works in the US compared to the UK. What I talk a lot about in these podcasts as well is like, okay, how does their pre, during, and off season look like? Now, a lot of these kids in the US have had a training age from about high school. Here isn't always the case. So with them learning to lift, with them having these small exercise adaptations over their sort of collegiate system, how is their sort of preseason, in-season, off-season looking like when you're trying to develop these fundamental sort of processes but still get them ready to perform?
I think it all starts really kind of boringly at education. So I want to know what their perceptions of off season is. Is it, because most of the time, and again, I'm just talking from my experience and anecdotally here with the athletes I've worked with, most of the time you're out of uni, you're back home or wherever you've gone, you're away from sport, it's rest time all over, right? So you're no longer thinking, I need to lift or I need to do this. So some people do. Some people love it enough to naturally have it as part of their process. But, as a majority, we're generally kind of like, the assumption is off season's a break, right? And often we have to educate them on actually the off season's a perfect time to emphasize and to build qualities that go beyond your sport. And how I usually explain it is it's like a wheel. And at one end of the wheel, you've got your sport. And at the other end of the wheel, you've got your strength and conditioning principles and training and conditioning programming. When we're in season, sport's at the top and strength and conditioning kind of is there. It's part of the wheel. We can't function without that piece. But it's at the bottom of the, it's at the bottom of the pile. We're almost working reactively. You're now competing at Bucks on a specific day. We don't know how difficult that game's going to be. Sometimes it's really physical. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes you could lift the day after. Sometimes you can't. Sometimes you can't lift 2 days after. So how am I meant to build a program when I'm not sure what those games are actually going to bring from a physicality perspective? So we're reactive. We have a baseline program. We need our minimum KPIs. We get these little windows of opportunities to kind of like push where they might have like a cancellation or a game cancellation, or they might have just a 2-week period where they're not training so that, we can push there. But we educate them on actually when you're in season, we are actually being really reserved with your training. We're trying to build your movement capacity up. We're trying to build your resiliency up through safer avenues. And when I say safer, we're not trying to emphasize here that lifting is unsafe, but stacking really difficult training on top of really difficult training on top of really difficult game time. Sorry, those two trainings were different: strength training and like your actual sport training and your games. Right now, you're risking yourself somewhere in one of those three departments, just because it's tough to tolerate all of that. So I know I can control how much you load and how much you lift and what exercises you do and what technically I'm trying to get you to do. So we're being reserved in that period. Come the off season, we can flip that switch. The dynamic flips. Well, actually, I've got 5 weeks now, or 6 weeks, or I've got a period of time where if you've got, and this kind of brings in again training age perceptions and also like the complexities of funding and financing and getting a gym membership and all this sort of stuff, and all the complexities that come with that, and which again come with education. We're actually in a really good opportunity to push pretty hard. And how that would look is I usually simplify the exercises, maximize the output. So if you can go to the gym, if you can get yourself in a gym, I know, let's say we've been learning a front squat, or we've been learning a movement, and we've been loading it, but you've been more in the learning and movement sort of phase. Well, then in the off season, I might now be like, right, I want you to get yourself on a trap bar, and I want you to just like hoist some heavy ass weight and make sure we're really effectively loading that lower body push exercise, because I can afford you to be quite fatigued from that. I can afford you to spend a lot of your capacity doing that movement, and then same with an upper body push movement, and then maybe like an upper body pull movement, and then fill it in with some accessories. But there's normally, when I'm in season, there's like 2 key movements, right? So we've got hypothetically like a lower body push exercise, like a squat variation, and then we've got an upper body push or pull dependent on 1, the day, 2, the sport, and then 3, what they've done, like if they've got 2 gym sessions or 1 gym session. So when they're now in off season, I can increase that to 3, but I'm trying to look at ways I can really get the most out of them. So I'm looking at seeing if we can like load you with bands, or load you with something, like give you some form of different. Let's say we've been doing bench press for the last 10 weeks. You improve your bench press as a Thai boxer, you're in a good spot. Well, actually now what I want you to do, and we've got the fortunate nature of using Team Builder and programming through all that. So we've got all of these metrics, we've got all their, we know what their maxes are, and we can program based on their max. We can go, right, well, go to a gym, you need these 2 bands to set up. This is how you set it up. Let's change the dynamic of your bench press. And off season is just a great chance to do that and just put a little bit of emphasis. But again, it all starts with education, and it's education at the start of the year. So again, it's kind of setting them up and letting them be part of it. So something that I do is, when it comes to near off season, I start to like question the athletes, like, what have you got access to, right? What have you got at your disposal? Because I always know that, we can build a session based on anything. Like if you've got no weights, long duration isometrics, it's going to be boring as hell, but guess what? It's going to be really beneficial for a lot of things. So I know without any equipment, we can do some good work, but I want to know what people have got access to. And then I start to develop, optional options for their sessions that they are involved in. I feel like if we let them have a bit more control over the program, then the commitment goes up, because now they feel like there's some
over it.
That's right. They have some control over that. And something that works really well with that, and I love this function on Team Builder, is the tag section. So we've done a lot of work this year to make sure that our tags are all in line with the exercises. So when we upload a program for Easter, it's like upper body vertical push exercise. And now the athlete has the option to select one from our our list based on what they have available. And we make sure that there's always bodyweight options, and there's always like machine isolation based options, and there's also free weight options. So now again, I'm like, okay, well, does this sound like an exercise that some of you would like to do over the Easter? Yeah. Okay. No problem. That's in. And I do it in front of them, and I'll show them what it looks like and make them kind of be part of that process.
Yeah.
And then, come the preseason, it's the same thing. It's just, they've done an off season. We do go through deloads, depends on the athlete, depends on the training age. Like most of them aren't, I always find this, one funny thing about Team Builder is our feed is always stacked with PRs. And, it's just the way it is. We got 450 athletes under the performance program. And of course, every time they do a movement, they PR it. And it's funny because it's like when you get to a certain training age, those PRs just don't come around often. So you can really see when like certain athletes say, right, that you've PR'd, that's your first time you've PR'd your back squat like this academic year. That's a significant moment. Whereas you'll see other athletes that are new where they're PRing every week because they're still not at their like potential. Their body's still figuring out what their actual ability is like. Yeah, often with managing kind of like preseason, we're trying to kind of like, I don't know, I guess manage introducing in kind of like expectations on loading. And some of them are just like, they've never lifted proper before. They never felt that intensity and never felt that fatigue. So here's what it feels like. And we've got an opportunity to do that too, like, because we got time. And once you're in season, now we can start to refine things down and we have to be a bit more reactive. But preseason and off season, I can, as long as they're part of it, I believe we've got a good process of commitment to get the people, like get the athletes actually doing some good lifting in the off season.
Yeah. No, I think it's just to stack these, as you've said. Before we sort of end the podcast, what's some advice that you would give to new coaches or coaches coming into this industry?
I think it's been a recurring theme throughout this chat, really. Be curious. Don't take things off face value. Don't believe everything you see, but also, question everything you see. You can't just immediately assume something doesn't work because clearly it does. Some guys are jacked on doing this method. It might not work for you. It might not work for your athletes. It might not work for all your athletes. Sorry, but we've got to understand that things can work. Things might not work for you. I think we just need to be curious, but I also think that's hard to accept because it's open to, you've got to really kind of set your ego and set your pride aside to accept that. And that's not easy to do. It's not an easy thing to do, but I think the industry is only going to get more chaotic. And unless we start to organize that chaos by just understanding our own learning and our own education and opening up to these concepts, but also just openly questioning them. Like always people having questions to me. I encourage my athletes to do it. I encourage other coaches to do it to me. I do it to other coaches. I just want to know and I want to question it. I'm not trying to catch you out or say it's wrong. I'm just intrigued. And I think that's something that people get defensive about is they think, oh, if I'm asking questions, it's because I'm trying to prove you wrong or I'm trying to like trap you into making a mistake. But really it's just, I'm just curious and I want to know. So I think we need to open up that like healthy communication to within all the coaches, within all new coaches, just be moldable, be coachable as well. Like get yourself stuck in, follow someone else's program, get yourself underneath someone else's wing, whether that's online or whether that's in person, experience things. I think the only reason why I loved the personal training and that's what really got me hooked on it, like this industry, is like the first year or two, I earned barely anything. I was not good at business. I was not good at selling personal training packages. I was not, but I was just training all the time. I was training with other trainers. I was training with other people, and I was just able to mold myself to some concepts that got me hooked on this idea that there's so much to this industry. There's so much good in this industry. It can literally change the world. So why aren't we? It can change so many people's lives. So we just need to give it the curiosity that it deserves because there's just so much to it. It's such a complex.
100%.
So yeah, that would be where I'd try and lean people towards and lean new coaches towards.
Nice. You can sort of tell everyone your social media in case they have any questions or want to reach out regarding anything that you've said. If you shout out your Instagram, that'd be good.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's the Kinetic Coach on Instagram. And yeah, I usually just post videos of me lifting, to be fair, but I saw as an open channel and people can fire me a message on there. I've got a Facebook page as well, same sort of thing. It's not my strong suit, is the old social media. But yeah, I'm always active on it. So yeah, do feel free to fire any questions over.
Legend. I appreciate you, Jack.
And you, good to chat.
Peace.
Wicked.